All right, welcome back, everybody, from that amazing, fantastic documentary. And now I'd like to bring back to the stage to moderate this Q&A and discussion, Alex Lemus from One Colorado.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for staying with us after this powerful and timely screening of Heightened Scrutiny. My name is Alexander Lemus again, and I'm proud to be here on behalf of One Colorado. We are the state's leading advocacy organization for LGBTQIA+ Coloradans and their families. At One Colorado, we work year-round to advance pro-equality policies, protect access to gender-affirming care, improve health equity, and build power and community all across Colorado. From fighting anti-trans ballot initiatives to supporting LGBTQIA+ youth in rural community members, our work is about ensuring every Coloradan can live safely, with dignity, with freedom, no matter who they are or where they live. Today's film really reminds us that trans justice is not theoretical or far away. It's deeply personal, and it's happening right here, right now. I am very excited to welcome two of our amazing team members from One Colorado. So first is First up is Jax Gonzalez, One Colorado's political director. Jax leads One Colorado's political and legislative strategy at the state capitol. So very excited to have you today, Jax.
Thank you.
And I'm also bringing up Sam Charney, who is one of our Youth in Schools team members, who brings lived experience in youth advocacy to everything that they do. So thank you both. Okay, so to get us started for both of you, what really stood out to you most in this film? And was there a moment or theme that felt especially personal or familiar?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction and smart words. This is my first time seeing this film. And I was really excited that it was being brought to CinemaQ because it's so timely. I think the first thing that I'm really sitting with is something we know and we'll talk about more, but that the facts don't matter. We are in an environment, in a political moment, where science and facts are not changing people's minds. And that is hard as someone who went to school to get a PhD in the science of feminism, essentially. And I think it is so striking to me that the way that we know how to change hearts and minds actually doesn't work at the Supreme Court, unfortunately, because they're making arguments based on fact. Unfortunately, the outcome was not based on fact from the Skrmetti case. And I think that it's just so hard to constantly remind myself when I'm having conversations with people that sharing the statistics and the science and the information isn't going to change their minds. I have to connect with them on a level of empathy. I think that the other thing that feels deeply personal to me about this, besides the fact that I'm a trans person who's accessed medical care and medical transition, is that I have quoted Chase several times in the last 6 months because I know that as a leader, as someone that people are looking to often, as someone who is in front of people often talking about this, I have to help people believe that we will win. And Chase does an incredible job at reminding people of that. You might have noticed at the end, one of the last things he says on that stage is that no matter what happens, we will take care of each other. He does not promise it's going to be okay because he knows the highly likely outcome is that they rule not in our favor. But he says, trans people have always found ways to protect each other, and we will continue to do so, regardless of what the court does.
Yes, very good. Hi, I'm Sam. You know that, though. I think the thing that stuck with me the most is this question of where does it end? Where does this idea of our rights being taken end? Because they're taking our rights away in terms of healthcare, but that could be expanded into mental health care and then be expanded into the way that one presents in a society and the way that one is able to show up for themselves and show up for other people and have that be prosecuted. So the question is, where does it end? And I think based on what's happening right now, the answer is it's not going to end. At least they're trying to make it not end, and they're trying to strip us of all of our rights. And so it's this idea of us as a community standing up and, as Jack said, fighting back together, because at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of us and the responsibility of everybody in this community, no matter how you identify, to stand up for your neighbor and stand up for your trans siblings and your queer siblings, to make sure that every single person is able to have the privilege and the right to be able to live authentically and live the way that every single person deserves to live.
Great, thank you both. I am going to go out of order, just so you're aware. Colorado is often seen as a progressive state. You know, we are oftentimes referred to as a safe haven for LGBTQIA folks. So with that in mind, I'm really curious about, like, what's the reality on the ground, and why can we, as folks living in Colorado or spending a lot of time in Colorado, why can't we afford to be complacent with that?
I don't think we can be I don't think we can afford to be complacent in this because, as I said earlier, and as this film stated, like, this is happening now. Our rights are being actively taken away. This film ended on a positive note, but those rights were taken away. We lost that case. We can't be complacent. We can't afford to be complacent because we don't have time. We're running out of time to be able to reverse all of these decisions and all of these things that are attacking us. And since they are attacking us, we can't sit there and take it. We have to stand up. We have to fight. And even if people are telling us that we are not valid, we are not real, we are not human, that's their opinion, and it may be an incorrect opinion, but we cannot afford to be complacent because people do not believe we exist. People do not believe that we deserve the right to exist. And by attacking us, by having our very fundamental rights as humans being attacked, and our very fundamental rights as people to live in America being attacked, it means that we have to stand up. And even if you are not transgender, even if you are not identifying as non-binary, it's time to look around and make sure that every single person is supported and every single person is not attacked.
Thank you for that, Sam. I'm like, okay, how do I go after that? Okay, so Colorado, believe it or not, has more protections for LGBTQ people than any other state in this nation in our laws. A lot of that is due to the work that One Colorado has done to uplift the voices of LGBTQ community members and get laws passed at the legislature over the last 15 years. I'm new to the organization. I've only been there almost a year and a half now. That's wild. Almost, not there yet. But what we know is that across the state of Colorado, even though we have state-level rights, those are not equating to local safety. We know that the cultural norms at the local level across this state vary drastically. Depending on where your child goes to school or where you go to school yourself, you could have incredibly affirming practices and policies in place that have been in place for now 15, 16 years. I'm thinking about Boulder Valley School District, which has had a inclusive policy for that long for trans students and staff. Or you could be in a school district that just banned trans girls from playing sports. And so it's not only really important for us to not be complacent in accepting, okay, we have these rights, great, we're good in Colorado. It is also really important to recognize that this is a pattern of dehumanization, and for us to be complacent in the dehumanization of any group of people is to further the dehumanization of our community. And so over the past 6 months, I'm like, how long has it been since January? It feels like 10 years. We have seen the systematic dehumanization of immigrant communities. We have seen the continued construction of trans people as other. And that is no accident, right? This is a long-term playbook that the far right has used. And I think it's extraordinarily important not just for us to understand how dehumanizing trans people equals inequality, but also dehumanizing groups of people equals inequality and equals a lack of safety. Because I promise you, the next thing on their agenda is to continue to dehumanize the next group of people. The Supreme Court there was an executive order that just made it so that unhoused people could just be like rounded up and put into work camps. The legal structure that they used to make that argument and why that should happen is a type of law that was used against LGBTQ people being in public as being criminal. It's all connected, right? And so it's extraordinarily important for us to have an understanding of what's going on and then show up in the ways that we can. And there's lots of ways to show up. It does not always look one way. There are many roles in the revolution.
Jax, could you elaborate a little bit on what we've been seeing related to LGBTQ rights here in Colorado? So whether that be at the Capitol, seen in community, but what have we seen over the past year or so, whether that be bills that have been proposed or initiatives trying to move forward?
Yeah. So in Colorado, again, we have more protections than any other state. This last year, we just codified into state law the requirement that private insurance that is managed by the state must include gender-affirming care. We also ended the reporting of testosterone to the prescription drug monitoring program. We were the first state to do that. You might be surprised that testosterone is reported to the prescription drug monitoring program. It's a holdover from the war on drugs and misuse of drugs by athletes. But what it meant was there was a list of people who had been prescribed testosterone, and that list of people was going to a federal level institute that was tracking that. And so we've ended that. We're no longer tracking it or reporting it from Colorado outside the state of Colorado, which is a huge win. Additionally, there were several other bills this last session that did some work to make sure that we had as many rights in place as we possibly could. However, we know that the law is an extraordinarily imperfect tool for liberation. Some would say not a tool for liberation, because as Chase said, right, it is a violent form of control. And so we are also, One Colorado has been following along a process where we are likely to see 1 to 2 or more anti-trans measures on the 2026 ballot here in Colorado, not at the federal level, in Colorado. How could that happen? Well, you can get on the ballot either by being referred by the state legislature or a citizens initiative. You have to collect 127,000 signatures to get on that ballot. As of right now, there are no measures on the ballot for 2026. They are moving through the process, and we are using every tool that we have to fight against them getting onto the ballot. However, we believe that we have reason to believe that they will make it onto the ballot. Unfortunately, the only thing you have to do to get on the ballot, besides collect signatures, is prove that you're a single subject. Doesn't matter if it's unconstitutional in the state of Colorado. And so we spending a lot of time following administrative processes in the state of Colorado to make sure that we are ahead of where they are going next. But what I really want y'all to hear is that this is a very loud minority of people pushing these through. These are people who have been radicalized by Moms for Liberty. These are people who are operating outside of truth or reason. They are terrified. And it is really important to me that I continue to find ways to understand their humanity with the belief that someday they will see mine.
Thank you, Jax. Sam, I'm curious to hear from you, hearing about folks in these positions of power, whether they be legislators, people running these very large, or not very large, but these groups of people trying to attack our community. You know, what would you want to share with them about how this directly impacts young people? How this is impacting people's day-to-day lives? Like, what would you want them to hear from the collective youth of Colorado?
I recently turned 19, so I'm like speaking as like kind of a former youth, but also like kind of considered a youth, so it's like a really weird space. But I think what I want them to hear is the people you're attacking is such a minority of people. It's 5% of people are transgender, and you're continuing to put all of your brain effort and all of your vile attacks on a very small percentage of people, and a very small percentage of people that are not harming you at all. And I think within that, it's also important to point out that, like, we saw all of those hate comments that Chase was getting, and all of the vile stuff that was happening to Chase and all the people that were involved in the U.S. versus Skrmetti. And it's important to point out that the people that are spreading all this hate aren't actually reading the articles. And like they said in the documentary, these articles are made to raise public opinion, raise outrage, and they're not actually reading the content of the articles, and the content of the articles are proving them wrong. And so it's just really interesting, and I want to encourage people that don't believe that I exist, that don't believe that transgender people are valid, to look within yourself and figure out why you're spending so much mental energy on attacking people that have done nothing to harm you, and attacking such a small percentage of people that are just trying to live. And really take a very long and hard look at your own policies, at your own outlook on life, and why you decide that you will not spend the brain effort to recognize that these people are real, these people are not harming you whatsoever, and these people are just humans trying to exist like everyone.
That was beautifully said, Sam. So we know that this fight isn't just happening in courtrooms. It's happening in communities, conversations, and at the ballot box. What are some of the most meaningful things that people can do, everyday community members can do, to support the transgender community and push back against these attacks?
So I will start with, when you exit this room, we have a table out front, and we're asking folks to defend trans rights in 2026. We have been collecting those pledges for all summer long. We collected them at every Pride we went to across the state. We did 22 in June. We will continue on starting this weekend, tomorrow in Greeley. And we collected over 4,000 pledges to defend trans rights in 2026 to show our community that we have people across the state who are not going to leave them alone in this fight, leave us alone in this fight. And so you can pledge to defend trans rights right outside the door. And if you already get emails or information from us, you can just not put your information down, totally fine. Just give us your name and your pledge so that we can show our community that we're not alone. The second thing that I will say is that it is extraordinarily important to humanize trans people. What does that even mean? What that means is talking to people in your everyday life about the trans people that you know, about how you believe that trans people deserve humanity. What we know is that 7 in 10 people say that they've never met a trans person. Many of us in this audience probably know that's probably not true. They just don't know that they've met a trans person. And it still has an extraordinary impact on the empathy for trans people. And so one thing One Colorado did in the last year is we launched Transforming the Narrative, which is a project that includes a cohort of trans leaders from across the state of Colorado, representing every single region of our state, which is no small feat. It's rather rural in many places. And that project was to help build power at the local level across the state to help people have conversations about trans equality, about trans people, so that when they go to vote in 2026, they understand what they're voting for or against. Because it's not just about whether or not a trans child should access gender-affirming care, but more so that trans people deserve dignity and humanity, and we shouldn't be legislating people's dignity and humanity away. And so talking to people, talking to your neighbors, hosting little book clubs, those conversations actually have a much higher chance of changing someone's mind than giving someone the statistics and information we know to be true.
Yes. I think in harmony with all of that, like educate yourself on transgender people, on trans rights, especially if you are not transgender and especially if you're not part of the queer and LGBTQ community. It's important to educate yourself on these rights because trans people are tired of having to defend themselves, are tired of having to educate people on what they are, on who they are, on the things they deserve. And so if you're leading spaces and walking into spaces with having this pre-existing knowledge of what a transgender person is, what they might be going through, what's happening right now, it shows people that you are an ally. It shows people that you are deserving of a space at the table, and it shows people that they can trust you, and it shows transgender people specifically that they can trust you with their allyship, and they can trust you that you will stand up for them.
Great, thank you both. So in the face of everything going on in today, what gives you hope still?
Sorry. This is the question I spent the littlest time thinking about ahead of time, and now it's showing, obviously. I am currently reading Let the Record Show, which is a book by Sarah Schulman about the HIV/AIDS epidemic and explicitly about ACT UP, the organization that organized specifically inside and outside systems of power to get not only dignity for people with AIDS, but also treatments and resources. That organization, often many people in our community will say, we have to think about our elders who came before us and they fought hard and they won. And we can do it too, right? And so for me, it's about understanding actually what tactics did they use, what was successful, what did they learn, so that I don't have to replicate the wheel, right? Our community has been doing this a long time. I mean, ACT UP was founded in the mid-'80s, and understanding that I am part of that lineage as an organizer, as an advocate, helps me believe that there is a future that I want to be a part of. Secondarily, I used to be a teacher. I used to think I was going to go into teaching full time. Here I am, kind of sometimes teaching. And there is this author, Bettina Love, who published this book, We Want to Do More Than Just Survive. And it's about the dehumanization of black kids in schools by white teachers. 80% of teachers are white women. 80% of teachers are white women. And so that means that those folks go into the classroom with a certain idea of how students should be treated, and also a certain savior complex, essentially, often. And Bettina Love says in this book that the number one thing that white people can do is believe in a future as co-conspirators to the movement. Because if we can't believe in a future, in a time where people are experiencing such high levels of harm, how can people who are multiply more marginalized believe in a future? And she says that people who were organizing abolition, who were enslaved, had to believe in a future where slavery didn't exist. And that has always sat with me as a reminder of how to hold hope for the future, is that it's the least I can do. The least I can do is believe that we will win.
Yes. I think what gives me hope is, number one, the organizations and communities that have fought back, that are fighting back right now. Organizations like One Colorado, organizations like PFLAG, organizations like Inside Out Youth Services, all of these organizations that are collecting and fighting back for people. And then internally, what gives me the most hope is my family, is my mom, who has done nothing but support me and who has fought so hard for me to be able to have the rights that I do and be able to show up as my authentic self, and also my transgender sibling, who is able to reap the benefits of some of the things that I have fought for and able to show up as themselves in spaces that I was not comfortable showing up in. And so what gives me hope is seeing this change, and even though it may be small, and even though it may not be as drastic or dramatic as the change that we want to see, is seeing that even though they're attacking us, and even though we are not being heard, we are not alone, and we are a community together.
Great. Thank you both so much. That is the amount of time that we have for today, so please give them both a round of applause. The One Colorado team will be out front at our table, so we would love to have you stop by, learn more about our work, or ask us any questions that you have. But thank you all so much for staying.